been going right about alternatives in the near term is that there's been a weaning of some of the hedge fund managers as a result of what I would describe as mediocre performance in the industry. And so that's a positive on a net basis, because as you get down to a lower volume of managers, you'll sift through the higher quality managers. It'll be easier for investors to pick managers with less volume of managers. So that's a net positive in my opinion. What's going wrong in the industry, it's no fault of the industries really, but it's really the monetary policy that's been globally coordinated since the financial crisis is still quite lax. And so the combination of the Federal Reserve, Bank of Japan, Bank of China, and what's going on with the ECB has depressed interest rates and has accelerated valuations in the equity markets. And so that concomitant with a little bit more robust growth in the United States, we're seeing GDP prints now at around 3.1%. You've got some earnings resurgence in equities, which is powering the market. So since election day of last year, 11 short months ago, market's up about 25%. There's $5.4 trillion of equity that's been added to the markets. That's sort of bad for the hedge fund industry, because you've lost your ability to security select and analyze securities specifically when a rising tide is just lifting everything in the industry. So that's a big issue for us right now in hedge funds. The reason why the market, this is one of the longest bull markets in history, is that we had a very, very slow uplift from the crisis in terms of economic growth. Typically when you analyze the American economy from 1880 to today, the American economy slips into some form of a recession or slowdown every 7 to 8 years. This is sort of a more robust expansion. We're into our 9th year of a bull market, 9th year of relatively good growth, but it's more like silly putty. You know, we would have seen in prior cycles 5, 6, 8% prints on the GDP, and then you would have seen that slack in the economy leading to a recession. We didn't get that this time, primarily because people were digging out of the financial crisis. The other thing that happened, and people get upset with me for saying this is a little bit political, is that the Obama administration was decidedly perceived as being anti-business. Now, I'm not saying that they were anti-business, because if there was an Obama administration official here, they'd be sore at me at saying that. They'd give you 10 or 15 reasons why they viewed themselves as pro-business, but it's really just a perception. If you do the Pew Research studies, 65% of the Fortune 2000 believed that the Obama administration was anti-business, and so a lot of cash grew on the S&P 500 balance sheet. A lot of capital that could have been repatriated back in the United States with the right tax system was left off the shore of the United States. And so this is creating more opportunity for the market. If we can redeploy that cash in a more business-friendly administration, or at least perceived to be more business, and we can repatriate capital, which is part of the GOP tax plan, you get that capital back. It could be upwards to $4 trillion being reinvested in the United States. This will lead to a longer than expected expansion. And so we sort of think that there's another 30 months to go here before you see any slack in the economy. I think you could probably get through the next presidential election without a recession. If you just given where monetary policy is right now, the fact that you're going to see some kind of fiscal stimulus with some kind of tax cut and or reform, and you've got a positive business-friendly environment. There's been some deregulation over the last 10 or 11 months. That combination is pretty powerful. And listen, market's up a lot, but the earnings are also up. And so when you're measuring this thing on earnings and you're analyzing it relative to interest rates over, say, 70 years, the market seems fairly priced. It doesn't necessarily feel overpriced. So that augurs not so well in the short term for the hedge fund space, because the problem is your longs are going up, 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 and your shorts are going up, up, up as well. And so that's why hedge fund managers typically have underperformed. Well, what's going right in Washington is that there's been a wave of deregulation. What's going right in Washington is that they're going to resolve the DACA issue. That's my opinion. They'll come up with a plan for the 12 million illegal immigrants that are here in the United States, and then we'll well border up beyond that, and so that will tighten up the immigration, which will take more slack out of the jobs market. You can already see that sort of stuff in the unemployment data. The unemployment, they were at the lowest unemployment numbers in about 16 or 17 years. This is very positive. So good trend on regulation. What's going wrong in Washington is that they're trying to beat each other's brains in, and they are still operating under the politics of great polarity. And so I've experienced some of this personally. It's the personality destruction machinery of Washington, where they try to mash each other up as opposed to figuring out a way to collaborate with each other. So that's very long-term damaging, because we talk often about millennials. Millennials are disaffecting from the political system because they don't like all the garbage that's in the political system as it relates to name calling. So that's causing an inability to get the president's legislative agenda passed. Now, he's going to propose on November 1st a tax reform package. I've seen the reform package. I think it'll be very positive, very pro-business friendly. You're calling for the lowest corporate tax rate since 1931. Very, very positive there. You'll find that the middle class and the lower middle class are getting a break, but the upper class, in fact, is getting a marginal break, not too much of a break. And I think that'll be viewed as positive as well if you think about the social engineering construction of the tax code. So if we can get that passed, and I do predict that the president will get some Democrats on side as it relates to that, that'll be very positive. And so one of the things that he's horse trading with them is this DACA, this Dreams Act situation. So my guess is that it's completely impractical to take 12 million illegal aliens and figure out a way to ship them out of the United States. And so we're going to find a way to probably give them a path to citizenship, or certainly their children, a full and complete path to citizenship. And that will be positive. And so I think my guess is that he trades that with some Democrats to get them on side on tax reform. Healthcare thing is a little bit more tricky. I think that doesn't happen probably until the first or second quarter of next year. We talk about millennials and their consumption and absorption of news and where they're getting their news from. There's an interesting article recently where millennials are actually starting to pay for their news. They're going beyond the paywall into the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, which is an interesting sign that they don't feel like they're getting enough of a spread of information from the existing free news services that they're picking up on the internet. So I think that's a net positive. But what I find, and I have 3 millennials at home, what I find is that they're disaffecting from the political system in the sense that they're less willing to litigate issues like gay marriage, women's reproductive rights, less willing to litigate issues like the immigration issue. They're more focused on things that are data dependent and more about right or wrong. What are the right or wrong strategies for the society, as opposed to the left or right strategies? And so for whatever reason, baby boomers, we created this great polarity. In some ways, I feel, and I am a member of the baby boomers, so I say this and indict myself as well, I feel that our extremists, in terms of the way we're attacking each other and where we have this like moral righteousness about our political views, has caused great damage to the system. And so if you just look at the landscape and you look at the report card for baby boomer politicians, the members of the permanent political class, they have sort of failed the society. You've racked up $12 trillion of debt in the last 12 years. You're prosecuting 2 wars over the last 17 years, neither of which it's not clear to me that we've created any more safety for the average American. Those wars also caused a refugee crisis in Europe and led to the rise of ISIS, which in some ways is more formidable than even Al-Qaeda was. So we're not thinking about these things the way we need to. We probably need to spend more money on infrastructure, rebuilding our school systems, our electrical power grid, rethinking our cybersecurity mechanisms to protect ourselves, and we haven't really been doing that. And so millennials are growing frustrated with that. And so the good news is that they're reaching out now into other news outlets. Now my guess is that the next wave of politicians will probably be less political in their orientation. I think that there's a wave of apolitical natured politicians coming over the next 10 or 15 years. Be good for the society. Also, there's a lot of righteousness there. I mean, so I listen, and I'll say this in my formal remarks. My short stay in Washington, I can sum it up as the Game of Thrones screenwriters got together with the Hunger Games screenwriters, and then they met up with the House of Cards guys. And the combination of the 3 of them wrote something called Washington, D.C. And so it's a combination of capriciousness and ruthlessness that us in the business community would never fully understand. And so for me, I often say to people, we live in a tough environment on Wall Street, but I want you to imagine the worst person that you met on Wall Street, that happens to be the best person in Washington. And so for me, I think it's very tiresome for the American people. The Congress as a whole has a slightly higher approval rating than the North Korean dictator Kim Il-jung for a reason. People are very dissatisfied with what's going on. Don't feel like they're getting a fair shake.